Welcome to Masters and Crew Lunch Bunch. We are just a group of friends and colleagues who get together and share ideas and what we are doing to try and plan for retirement. This is not financial advice, but just things we are doing as a group and is strictly for educational purposes. It is up to you to do your due diligence on anything we talk about. Today, we will be discussing the role of emotional intelligence in financial management. With that, let's get started.
Hey, welcome everybody. So last week we talked about Composer and we talked about just all the pieces of Composer. If you've got further questions on that, just reach out to me and we'll touch base on that. We touched on this last week, the importance of emotional intelligence. I almost don't even really like the word intelligence because I think it's really not even about whether or not you're smart in that area. It's really about how you manage, how you feel about things. And that's very difficult to do. So let me ask you something. If you don't really have a lot of knowledge about how you manage your money and you get a windfall, let's say you have this distant aunt that you didn't even know about and she leaves you $50,000. What do we do when that $50,000 first comes? What do we think about?
Debt.
Paying off debt. Yeah. So maybe we want to pay off debt, or maybe we have a trip we want to go to. Maybe you've got kids that are small and the wife's been asking you, hey, I'd like to go to Disney World at some point. So what we start to do is as soon as we get a windfall, we start to bucketize the money. And it's a very human, natural thing. We bucketize the money. Look, there's nothing necessarily wrong with bucketizing money, but typically we bucketize each one of those components into what I would consider categories that are non-refundable. So meaning the money is burned. It's gone forever. And so that's okay to do on some parts of the money, but you always need to think about how can I grow this nest egg into something else? Now, if you get a windfall of $50,000, it's painful for you to think about, I'm just going to save all of this, right? Would that be natural to say that I'm going to save all of this? No, because you need to have a balance between the two. Maybe you take $10,000 invested, maybe you take $10,000 and go to Disney World with the kids, and then maybe you put $20,000 in savings, and then you're like, you know what, I need a new car too. My car is about to blow up. You need to have all of the different steps. So when I say emotional intelligence, it's really just figuring out how to bucketize those in such a way that it can be something that can be longer term lasting than just the right here, right now. There's several different components to this and we'll walk through all of those, but I'll kind of start. By the way, this slide deck was created by AI. So it is becoming pretty fantastic. If you tell AI specifically what you want to do, and then ask it. You can modify a few things, but it's pretty good. This one is Prezi. So I've used Prezi for a long time. A lot of my students have used Prezi as well, but this one does a pretty good job. We'll just read a little bit of this. Emotional intelligence is vital for effective financial management. It influences how individuals recognize and regulate their emotions. And so I think that's the critical piece of it, right? The problem with money is with other things. I'll give you an example. When you look at your tree in the backyard, does the tree ask any questions? No, it doesn't ask any questions. It just receives input and then does actions based upon that input. If there's no water, the tree's going to die eventually. If it's a really tall tree, let's say it's 50 foot tall, it'll take years for that tree to die. Even if no water, let's say there's no rain for 5 years, that tree will probably still be around if it's 50 foot tall. If the tree's 10 foot tall, it is definitely going to die in 5 years with no water. And it's really about the root system. And so the tree doesn't really think about, well, I don't have the root system that I need, so I got to make these decisions because I don't have the root system that I need. It just takes the inputs and then does what it does. And so you need to be more like a tree with your money. You have to think like a tree. And so what the tree does, it says, oh, I have water, I have access to this water now, so I'm going to take that water and I'm going to pull that into my roots and I'm going to grow another branch. And so it's constantly thinking about growth. And so if a tree is not growing, it's automatically dying. Right? So that's how you need to think about it. So all of these emotional tools are really to get your brain to translate money into trees. Why do we not act like a tree when we have money? Some guesses.
We'll act out of necessity to stay alive, while we'll make choices that we don't necessarily need to survive, but we'd like to do things for fun. And we spend frivolously sometimes because of that.
Absolutely. And it's really because your brain wants to make you happy. That's its whole purpose, is to make you happy. It's not really there for your long-term survival or your financial survival. And so that's how people get into this kind of spots where financially they're struggling because they don't really have the mental files that they need for that. And because it's a struggle, right? Every time you take the windfall money, you take $10,000 and you put it into investments, that's a trip you didn't get to take, right? So to your brain, exactly right. It doesn't have that pleasure link to it. So then your brain automatically says, why did I do that? That doesn't make any sense. Or worse, you put the 10,000 into an investment and it goes to 7,000. Now, what are you thinking? You're automatically thinking that, well, that was a really dumb decision. I shouldn't have done that. When the action was correct, it wasn't the action that was taken. It was really just time differential wasn't there. You need to give it some space, give it some time to breathe, grow into something that is larger than life. This says understanding and managing those emotions leads to better budgeting. So this slide deck goes into a lot of different budgeting components. It really depends on where you are in your life. If you have plenty, then the budgeting piece isn't really as important as it. Beginning stages budget is paramount, right? Because you have to set money aside. If you don't set money aside, you're not going to grow the nest egg. If the egg doesn't grow, then you cannot compound that into something that's worthwhile. The budgeting piece is really, really critical. Also, stress management. Don't put money into an investment account if the washer's broke, right? Because you're attributing to the stress level. Now you're washing the dishes by hand because your dishwasher's broke, and so it doesn't make sense to increase stress for that. So sometimes investing is not right now. That's perfectly legitimately viable. If you've got other bills to take care of, then you don't want to use that money for investing. Take care of the stress pieces first, because you cannot have this and be a great investor. The more stressed you feel, the more mistakes you're going to make in investing, the more investment bad decisions. You have to not be stressed, whether it be about the investment pieces or even your regular life. If you're really, really stressed, these are going to be awful. It increases those complexities. So the more complex things are, you know this very well, James. More things are complex, the harder it is to get that data, right? So in your world, everything's about how do I get the data? How do I mash these together to where I need them? And so the more you do that, the more complex it gets. And so it increases what the outcomes might be. Okay. And so then the last piece is it's really about you need to do all this preparation for when the larger sums of money come, because it gets really, really hard. And I'll kind of show some of the details of what that looks like. Okay. About triggers. Emotional triggers such as fear, excitement, or anxiety can lead to impulsive financial decisions. So we talked about this a little bit at the Disney World. So if we want to go to Disney World, then that category. And so we did that. But if I'm being very honest with myself, that was an anxious time for me, because when we went, we didn't have a lot of extra money. So that felt a little bit anxious to me. We had a great time, and I splurged like I did. Max wanted the lightsaber at the Star Wars thing. I bought it. He was really sweet though. When we got there, he says, I don't have to have the lightsaber. I'm like, buddy, we're standing here. Let's go ahead and do this. I mean, a couple $100. So you just go ahead and do those things. Don't make the trip hard because of that. But again, I was a little bit anxious about it because I think we probably spent $11,000 for the whole trip for 4 people. It's pretty pricey. And so I was very anxious about it. And so I hope that it did not translate into how the family felt about the trip. I don't think it did. But you've got to think about how can you control those different emotions. What are the triggers? So every person has different trigger thresholds. So if you think about, let's say the spouse says, I want to buy a Cadillac Escalade. And you're like, that's probably a trigger for some people, right? If the spouse says, I want to buy Escalade. You have to figure out what are the triggers, and then how do you manage through those, and how do you think and talk through, and how do all those different pieces happen, right? Because ultimately, those fears and anxieties and all of those different pieces are the components to making things very complicated when it comes to investing, because what will end up happening is all the money will be used up for other purposes. Once that is done, you have destroyed your financial future forever. You have to think about what is the future, at the same time managing the stress levels of the garage door just got wiped out and all the different stuff that we have to worry about. Okay. Identifying personal triggers. We talked about this. You can manage these with strategies. So what I like to do is, if let's say I make a little bit of money on an investment, And I'll typically take part of that money off and cash it out, put that money in the bank, and then I'll spend it. I think it's really good to have components of that. So let's say you do an investment and you make $3,000. The best thing you can do with that is to take at least 10% of that, $300, and just blow it. Have a good time. Because if you make, let's say you make a 30% return or a 40% return, like we were talking about with the bots, just go have fun with some of that money. Because if you continually grind that money back into the pile, you're going to get stressed out about it. And when it goes down, you're going to be really stressed out about it. Oh, I could have bought something, or I could have had a little trip, or all these emotions start flooding in as soon as things aren't perfect. When it's going straight up, you could have the other problem, euphoria. You could be so excited about that. Oh man, this hit 50,000. By next year, it's going to be 150,000. You get all wrapped up in the thoughts and emotions of it. And the truth is it going to make it to 150,000? It might not. And now you've put your hopes and dreams and you started to earmark that to different levels when it may or may not ever make it. So I think that's critical to identify personal emotional triggers. And it's different levels for different people. So if maybe your trigger is $5,000, maybe your trigger is $20. I had a student one time in my class, I was doing this exercise and we were talking through this exercise. And I said, what amount of loss makes you nervous? Raised her hand. She says, $30 makes me nervous. And I said, well, then you're not ready for investing, right? Because as all of you know, most of you have done investments. You've dropped more than $30 on something, right? Probably more than 1,000. And so you really need to think about, how do I manage through that for my own personal, and find your levels. My level is different emotionally than someone else. And so you have to figure out, what are my levels? And if $30 makes you nervous, then just do bonds, or just put your money in a savings account. That's where you're ready for right now. Some people, a lot of money managers will tell you to diversify. So they'll say, diversify your portfolio into different sections. That's okay too, but what that's really doing is it's matching whatever your emotional feelings are about the money and putting them into categories. That's not necessary if you can just up your level of emotional intelligence. You won't need to take riskier bets as long as you feel good about them. But it takes practice, a lot of practice. And by the way, this is not something that you just arrive at and then you're there. This is a daily thing. If I have a stressful day at work, I'll give you an example. 2 days ago, as you guys probably know, the market was down pretty hard, especially on the NASDAQ side, really nasty. And so I had some tough stuff happening at work. Market's down. It's like somebody come in, they're like, man, you look wiped out today. What's going on? I was like, oh, thank you very much. Let's start there. But then secondly, I started thinking, as they left the room, I started thinking about it. Why did that affect me today? I've been fine up to this point. I've been fine for the last 6 months. So why is today? What is it? What's the trigger that set me off? Well, the drop was significant. Some of my really bad. And so that started it. And then once it snowballed into other things of, well, stuff at work was hard and I'm trying to figure some stuff out. It's not working. So it's kind of compounds. So it's not something that you can just say, I'm 100% ready for this. It's really a daily thing. Creating a budget that accounts for emotional triggers. So that part is really just, if you're budgeting, go ahead and budget for some of that money go into investments and make that permanent. If you don't see that money, then it's going to go into the bucket and never miss it, right? And so do as much of that as possible. So if I think back to what really got me started on a great journey, it was Chesapeake. Chesapeake did a 15% 401k. So I did 15. For a while, I was doing 18. So just do as much as you possibly can. Retirement account, don't want to do that. Right now, I think Roth is probably the best way to go. It hasn't always been that way, but I think we know now from this last tax bill that they're not really going to be able to change taxes that much ever. That's the best that we can get with all of that work. This is really what's going to happen, or more, or higher. And so I think Roth is probably the way to go, because once you compound that money into a nice nest egg, if you don't have to pay any taxes on it, as long as the rules don't change, which they could, as long as the Roth rules don't change, I think that's probably the best way to go. Okay, next slide. Some of these are kind of, That's the only thing I don't like about AI. It seems a little redundant. Okay, setting financial goals, prioritizing spending wisely. Yeah, I mean, you guys all know. Me, that's just kind of basic stuff. And then discipline. The pictures are funny. This was me. It's like so wiped out. It's like I don't like that, because whenever you're in that state, you're kind of in a not really gonna. I didn't trade that day. Oh, I didn't look at anything. I didn't do any of that stuff because it doesn't really help. High emotional intelligence can recognize their emotional responses and implement coping strategies. So for me, it was, okay, I just need to pause and I need to figure this out. I need to find out why I feel that way. And then I can move on to the next thing. So I've made quite a few trades since then, but got to pause and figure out what needs to happen. And that's, like I said, that's a daily walk. That's not something that you all the time. Okay, so one part that I wanted to talk about was challenges of managing large amounts of money. So the problem with this is it gets harder as you go along. So when the money gets to larger pools, it gets more stressful. Why does it get more stressful with larger pools? More to lose. And what do we associate with losing? What is it, just the money, or is it what else? Yeah, failure. Yes, that's a great way to frame it. The potential of failure of accessing something forever, like that's never going to happen again. Is that likely, though? Probably not. If we look back, how many of those studies have we seen where people talk about, oh, if you would have bought Netflix at $14, or, oh, if you would have bought Apple at $5? These things are always there. But what's the truth? If you talk about Apple, for instance, when they say that, they're talking about how long of a span? Are they talking about 2 years? No, they're talking about 30 years. So this is the question. Can you, as an investor, manage through all the pain of 30 years of ups and downs of Apple? Because that's basically that's what they're saying. Oh, all you had to do was hold on to it. What does that mean even? Right? Okay, let's say you invested, so 2008 would have been an awesome time to invest in Apple. I don't know if you guys were paying attention to the markets in 2008, but Apple was hated. People thought it was going to definitely go in the toilet because of the financial crisis had happened. Apple got down to, I don't know, if you did a split adjusted of today, it would probably be about $6 is where Apple was at, where it is today. This split several different times. They did a 7-1 split, and I think they did a 3-1 split. They've done 3 or 4 different splits since then. So to say, oh, you should have just bought Apple and held on to it. Oh my God, Apple was at $150 right before the financial crisis happened. It got down to all the way to like $35 at that point. So you would have watched your $10,000 turn into $2,500 or $2,800. So that's easy to say, but in practicality, it doesn't make logical sense to the mind. The mind says, I had 10,000, now I have 2,500. What part of this is a good idea? The best thing you should have done is to double down on it, right? But who does that? What do we say? We say buy low, sell high, don't we? But do we do that? See, this is the problem, is like the emotional piece of it is what really gets in the way of that success. Really should have done is double down in 2008. What's the reality? Reality is that if the market completely crashes to nothingness, then money is destroyed. Money's destroyed, the economy will be destroyed. Won't need money anyway. So the way I think about it is, money is it's a construct. It's really just an idea that we have all agreed that this is the way we should transact with each other. You made an agreement with Continental. We are going to transact this amount of money, and we're going to get this service. That's what we've decided. That's the promise that we have to fulfill that promise. But the problem is that that's just an idea, a construct. And so it doesn't really mean anything. So the only way it could mean something is that the society continues to believe that it means, so that you have to compound into that, especially with inflation the way it runs. You have to compound that into, because if you just only receive daily, then it will eventually destroy everything. So I went on a tangent there. That's not really about this specifically. As the money increases and grows, the complexities increase. But it can also be, it can be rewarding too, because you can put parts of it away. Remember I said if you make $3,000, you should take $300 and go spend it? What if you make $30,000? What should you do? Take $3,000 and go spend it. Don't break those rules. Continue to have those same rules. If you make $300,000, what should you do? Take $30,000 and go spend it. Go to Vegas. Yeah, exactly. If you're really good at it, just go ahead and go to Vegas. But yeah, you should continue those same metrics, right? With the exact same percentage base, because it's changing now. So that way, I mean, you think about 30,000 to just blow. That's pretty fun. Like you could do a Disney trip, and maybe you want to go to Belize, and just like get crazy with it. Or maybe you don't like trips. Maybe you're like, I want a new car. I really want a new car. So you do that. But again, keep that same kind of cadence so that it continues on and you feel great about it, right? If you make 300,000 in the market, take 30,000 and go on 3 trips, and then your 300,000 is now 270 and it goes down to 200, feel bad about the 70,000 loss. Not as bad. That is the exact answer. It's such a weird psychological thing. The crazy part of this thing, you're going to convince yourself, man, I cashed out 30 of it, so I saved myself $7,000, right? That's where your brain will go. So it just creates this whole loop of feeling great about investing and feeling great about your future that you don't have if you don't follow those rules. So I encourage you, even with the small amounts, take those things and go buy a book or go buy something that you like. Maybe you like bow and arrows, go buy a couple of bows, like whatever your thing is, go do that. Larger sums of money can trigger higher emotional responses. When your portfolio gets big enough, you could have bought a house with the money that got dropped in one. Those are painful, right? You have to think about how I'm going to manage my thoughts. And I think really cashing out some of those is really helpful. I think help make it a little. Okay. We're going to skip some of these slides. There's too many. Oh, here we go. The graphic. That's weird that it went back to the same one. Okay, so I put these graphs together to kind of illustrate what I'm thinking about with the amounts, because the amounts get painful with larger sums. So this is a 15% loss. So you have $10,000 that you invested, and some things happened, bad, or here's all of a sudden fine yesterday. Now it's not cool. You guys know the drill. So your $15,000, you have a 50% loss of $10,000. You lost $1,500. How does that feel? It's pretty bad, isn't it? It's pretty bad, right? Because, you diligent, got the Aunt Faye money, and you put it in investment. He's like, I'm going for it. I'm going to do it. And then you lose $1,500. You're like, why did I do this? I should have just spent that money. I could have had extra Kohl's cash for just taking this $1,500 and blow it at Kohl's. It would have been better, right? You have all these things and thoughts that you come up. So, this is what I would say is kind of the thought process around just 10 grand. Now, the problem is that when the portfolio gets large, so this one I just did $1 million. So let's say the portfolio is $2 million and you have the exact same 15% loss, same investments, it's the same tickers, it's the same everything. It's a $300,000 loss. Did I do that wrong? No, I did that right. 2 million. $300,000 loss. How does that feel? Holy cow. I'm basically working for free for the next 2 years at work, right? That's the kind of emotion that it brings up. And so it gets really hard. And so you have to do one of two things. You have to either convince yourself that this is the exact same investments that I was doing before. It's identical. I haven't changed the formula. We went from making bundt cakes to cakes the size of this room. But it's the same recipe, it's the same cake. Now, are there logistic problems with making a cake the size of this room versus making a bundt cake that you shove in the oven? Absolutely there are. So there are logistical issues, but that's the weird thing about financial trading. It's the same. The markets are so liquid that if I click the buy button on Palantir, 1 share of Palantir, or I buy 50,000 shares of Palantir, it makes no difference. It executes, goes. And it goes like that. It's instantaneous. So it's not the same as baking cakes. If I need to bake a cake the size of Manhattan, that's a big problem that I don't even know how logistically you could. When my family and I went to El Salvador years ago, we went to this one spot for, I don't know if you guys had Papoosas. Salvadorian dish. It's rye bread. It's about this big, and it has cheese and beans baked inside of it. So it's like kind of like if you took tortillas like this and baked them together and put stuff inside, it would be like that. I guess a historical hot pocket. Like, they're really good. I like them a lot. There's several different places in Oklahoma City that have great. The one on 23rd Street is the best one. It's like a blue house. But anyway, they had a pan about the size of this room where they had made the largest pupusa ever. They got the Guinness Book with this big pan that we saw in El Salvador. So we go to the place, and there's a whole bunch of different vendors that make along that row, and it's about 3 or 4 miles from the airport. We stopped off, and it was like, oh, cool, we're taking pictures and all this stuff. But I can imagine that whatever they had to do to get the fire stoked and all that stuff took days to prepare to make the one pupusa just so they could get in the Guinness Book. And so logistically, that's harder. But with finances, it's not. The only part that's hard is your brain. I have to wrap my brain around, don't see this, it's just a 15% drop. Calm down. It's just a 15% drop. Could be 50, right? Right. Typical markets can drop anywhere from 35 to 50% market crash. That's just the index. Some stocks go down 70%, 80%. So does that make them a bad company or a bad investment? Not necessarily. Just the way the market goes. You have to kind of divorce yourself from this kind of thinking of, I could have just bought a house, right? And have to review the thesis of, am I in the right investment? So it dropped 15%. Am I still in the right investment? That's how you have to mature your mind as you go. And like I said, it gets harder because this number just only goes up. When you hit 4 million, that's 600,000. 8 million, that's 1.2 million. It's really scary. You're like, could have bought a mansion. Just had a drop it could have wiped out. It could have had a mansion. And so that's how our brain is. We have a really hard problem. Compounding interest is mathematical. It's perfect. Perfect mathematical calculation. In fact, for this week, I would say homework. I want everyone to go out and there's calculators there's a bunch of different ones, but there's a 401k calculator. Those are awesome. I want you to play with the 401k calculator and put some pie in the sky stuff into the calculation. 401k calculators will ask you questions about how much do you currently have? What is the yield that you're expected to return? What does your company match? And what do they match up to? So for Continental, you want to say 10%. That's what we match. You want to say 100% because it's 100% of the 10%. A lot of companies that get all this goofy stuff where they're like, oh, it's 30% up to 4%. They're just confusing you basically to pinch your pocket. Our company doesn't do that. Flat 10%, 100%. You want to put 10%, 100%, and put your current 401k amount in the calculator. It is going to default for 8%. Now, let me ask you something. From your experience in investing, do you think you can make more than 8%? Can't you? So play around with that. You're going to be shocked at the number. I put my numbers in, and I put 35% return for the next 20 years. What do you think my number came up as? 1.2 billion. So it is crazy. The math is real. Compounding is just a math equation. And so once you get your brain studied into how that works, you're going to be thinking about, wow, this could really change my life forever just by doing these calculations. So put all those numbers in and then I want you to put in a couple of different ones. I want you to put in 30% per year and then 15% per year and then do the standard 8. So if you just do the S&P 500, it's probably going to be right around 8. What about if you waited for a market? Let's say you do S&P 500 and you wait for a market crash. Leave it in the S&P 500. And then when the market crashes, then you start looking for individual stocks to pick after it's crashed. We just talked about Apple, right? Maybe you don't like Apple. Maybe it's Google or whatever your thing is that you know is going to be great. Those are going to have a 40% haircut in a market crash pretty easily, maybe 50, maybe more. And so those are great ones to think about picking up when 2022 was pretty rough. So a lot of SPACs got wiped out. That's what you don't want to pick up is like SPACs and different types of investments. Really tough because they just wipe out the entire nest egg and start over. So diversification is critical too. I think you need to be thinking about what do I need to invest in. You don't have to do individual stocks for everything. You could do 50% of your portfolio in S&P 500. You'll hit those 8%. You'll be shocked even with 8%. You can put in 10% in your 401k and then do 8% match. It's pretty wild, the numbers that'll come up. Start seeing 2 million, 3 million, 6 million. Stretch it out to your 150, you'll see nobody wants to work that long. But if you stretch it out, you'll see even larger numbers because it compounds over time. And so it really starts to snowball into something.
One thing I would add is remember that the company will match on your bonus. So take advantage of that.
That's a great point. I did.
That's free money to begin with. Now you just got another 10% of free money.
Yeah, it's free money on top of, you won't pay taxes. Or if you're doing Roth, you would already pay the taxes, but essentially you still get the match money. Either way. Okay, so improving emotional intelligence is crucial for better financial management. So really just wrap this up. To me, it's really need to think about how can I improve how I think about transactions? Emotional piece. That's everything. Compounding growth rate and emotion. Those are your two critical pieces. You can master those two things, absolutely unstoppable. Like I'm talking millions of dollars. It's within anyone's grasp if you can do those two things. The compounding thing is the most important. You have to let it work. And if you let the emotions get in the way, then you're not going to let it work. Pulling it in and out of different strategies, different investment piece, all that stuff, which in itself is not bad, right? Sometimes you got to make changes. I made some changes this week. So for instance, I don't know if you guys have been watching Celsius, the drink company. That thing has been on absolute fire. It is crazy. It's up, I don't even know how much, 120% or something, Rachel? Yeah, 27 to $61. And so I trimmed that position. I took some off and I stuff to buy. I've just got it in cash right now. So you need to trim, you need to make those adjustments, but not all the time. Let it work. Let it get from 27 to 60. Let's say you think in your mind, okay, 8% is the highest return I'm going to get, right? Because that's what we're told. Every financial advisor tells you what? Invest in the S&P 500 and leave it alone. Kind of the standard, that's what we've been told. But the truth is way darker than that, way more complicated than that. The truth is that you can make a lot more than 8%, but you've got to make a lot of different moves. And you've got to think about it strategically, make good choices. Don't want to do any of that stuff, then just put it in the S&P 500 and leave it alone. That's why that advice is there. A lot of people are like, I don't want to mess with it. So if that's how you feel, then know yourself. That's part of your emotional intelligence for yourself, is that I don't want to mess with all that. So then do your calculations and figure out, when can I retire? Can I retire at 60? Okay, based upon this stuff, and I don't want to do that, I can retire at 60. So know yourself with those things. As financial stakes increase, application of emotional intelligence becomes even more vital. That is brilliant. That's exactly what happens. It's harder and harder. So you just have to manage through, okay, I'm not going to touch that. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to leave it alone, even though it's up huge. It's also about an age category too. If you're getting to a point in your life where you're ready to retire, well, then you make different choices, don't you? If you had $1 million and this hot market jumped it to 3, and you're ready to retire, like you're at that age, then you have to make a different choice. You need to just dump all that, put it in cash, right? And then move to the next stage, because everything's about timing as well. If you're 21 years old, and you hit 3 million, that's fantastic. Keep going. Might hit 100, right? Just keep going. But again, it's all, you have to know yourself and know where you are, how you feel about it. Like the one lady that said, I can't lose $30, then don't invest. That's going to wipe you out emotionally. I think I'm almost out of slides. Yep, that was it. Any questions or thoughts? Yes.
Reasons I can use it.
Absolutely. And it is fantastic. If you guys use the app that Fidelity has with that, it's awesome. So there's a Fidelity app for the HSA account. Download the app to your phone, and if you're at Walgreens and you buy some Band-Aids, scan that receipt, upload it to the site, and get your money deposited to where right out of your AC. So yeah, it's fantastic. You can invest. So I do. So I have level 2 options on mine, and then also the brokerage account on my agent. I can pretty much do almost everything that I can do in my 401k and my IRA, I can do in my agent. Yeah, it's a fantastic tool. Yes. Okay. Yeah, so if you log into your Fidelity account, it will automatically be there. Yeah.
Yeah. The only thing that you might have to do is go in to your options and say if you want to do options, not just straight there. If you want to do, your standard level 2, you just have to go in. Now you can just turn it on. It doesn't even have to go in for any paperwork.
Yeah, but it's a really good tool, and they match part of our HSA, right? So that's fantastic.
So in the Fidelity account, let's say set up the brokerage link, add the money. But is it like, do all the new funds go into that brokerage link, or do I have to keep track?
You can tell it. So it's in the Fidelity. There's like a separate page. It's not the main page. It's a separate page. You can go in and say, I don't want those to go into FID 500. What is that? FFIV, I think it's called. Fidelity 500 fund. You can tell it, I want to go to the brokerage link from now on. I kind of mix it a little bit. I have about 50% going into like a FID 500, and then the rest go into brokerage. But 95% of my money's that HSA app is so cool. It'll show you all of your account. Deposit that money. You can even deposit it to your bank if you have the bank linked to one of your Fidelity accounts. It doesn't ask a lot of questions either. I'm like, man, good game this. It's kind of weird. Yeah, until you get audited. Yeah, I'm not advocating for that, but I thought it was a little bit too loose of a system.
Chris, I'm glad you went over this because like the emotional intelligence is like a real thing. Because that's what I've been doing like this past week, going through, reevaluating my portfolio and making sure like all the dividends are set up the way it needs to be in case I turn that switch on to basically have that as income. It's a perfect example when you was talking about having indexes, because if index fall 5%, it doesn't hurt as much as Palantir going down 30%. So you really want to balance your portfolio to basically be more on the index in case you can navigate those turns when the market goes down, because when the market goes down, it always comes back. Prime example, April 7th, when everything just tanked. In the next couple of weeks, everybody's kind of in that panic mode. Next week, boom, it just shot right back up. You have so many people selling during that time because they thought the earth was falling, the sky was coming down. I know those people are looking back now like, why you should have doubled down at that.
I was aggressively buying at that, but that is scary, guys. I'm not gonna lie.
You just don't know.
I was down pretty heavy. Yeah. I was down probably about 35% on April 7th, and it was a shape recovery. So I just aggressively buying. I also did some evaluation of whenever things crash. I love riskier stuff. I know that sounds backwards, but riskier plays do better in crash reversal. So I was looking at my portfolio saying, okay, I've got some stuff that's more kind of medium type investments. And I took that cash, closed those positions, and bought riskier. Now, when that wouldn't work is if you have, the pandemic was a great example. The pandemic was a really rough time for investing. I don't know if you've pandemic, but pretty scary. Continental got down to $7. I was really aggressively buying during, but it could have just as well gone the other way. Yes. That's a great point. Yeah, it was a kind of a hit and miss. And so one of the plays that I did during the pandemic was Dave & Buster's. A lot of Dave & Buster's puts, selling puts for, it was about 35% gain premium on the puts at that time. Pretty crazy premium. My brain went to, well, if the pandemic creates lockdowns and people are locked out of doing anything, they can't fly, they can't do different things, best they're going to be able to do is once things starting to calm down, maybe they'll get to go to Dave & Buster's. I'm going to try to figure out how to do these little small trips because people are still going to want to get out and do stuff. That's not going to stop no matter what, no matter how sick people are. And so my brain went to, well, probably places like Dave & Buster's will do pretty well when they can finally open the doors back. I particularly like Dave & Buster's because they had a really good credit facility when the pandemic happened. They had a lot of cash on hand and they withdrew the whole credit facility. I don't know if you guys, so I should explain. A credit facility is a credit card. So like your personal credit cards, it would be like if you have a $29,000 balance on your credit or have access to 1,000 credit, draw the whole thing and put it in your bank account. Would you have done that during the pandemic? I would have. No, you wouldn't have? Oh, it's a great thing to do. If we can't, companies get to do that. Personal credit cards, you can't. You can do cash advances typically. So like if you have a $29,000 limit, you could do a $5,000 cash advance or maybe 10,000. Not all of it. Most companies withdrew their entire credit facility during the pandemic. We did as well, Continental. Whole thing and put it in the bank. And because we didn't know, when are we going to get to drill again? When are we going to start making any money on this oil that we have right now to sell that nobody wants? Can't sell natural gas, can't sell oil. It's just a disaster, right? And so Dave & Buster's withdrew their entire credit facility, which it doubled their cash position. They have this huge cash position, have to keep paying employees. And then they started, the PPP loans came out and all that stuff. So they were able to get some of those. So they were financially solvent the entire time during timing worked out right. But people were so afraid that they were just throwing all the shares, just throwing them away. So you could get crazy. Continental was the same way. Continental got down to $7. But to your point, it could have been pennies. It could have. Continental was the same thing, right? We had quite a bit of cash on hand. We withdrew the entire credit facility. So we had all this money in the bank just sitting there waiting. If the pandemic would have drug on, say, another 2 years, then we would have been in trouble. But the way it panned out, it worked out just Continental. And so get better at balance sheet, understanding how companies work, because that helps you to the right investment at the right time. Although the pandemic, lots of stuff did. Could have kind of thrown a dart at almost anything except for, really bankruptcy risk companies. They are already maxing out their credit facilities, maxing out all of they had no cash in the bank. And then the pandemic hits. What do you think happened to them? They got wiped out, right? So there were some bad ones, but there was a lot of good companies that did just fine. I think learning those operations and picking those types of things and pick things like I bought a little bit of Lulu. I like Lulu because both of my girls shop there and my wife buys some stuff for Max there. I refuse. I'm kind of old school, but I get it. I understand. And so there are themes like that you'll find over time that work out. I was a big buyer of Dollar Tree for many years. I sold a lot of covered calls on Dollar Tree, a lot of puts, had shares for a long time. And then when Trump changed export laws and some of the things that happened around tariffs, Dollar Tree just died. Like profits died, their balance sheet got softer, everything, their moat just got totally dried up. They had this huge moat around the castle, and now you could just walk across it. So when things change, you have to change your whole thesis and investment. We don't need to be on things that we need to be very so many of them to choose from. And new ones come every day, like Palantir. Everybody talks about Palantir. 4 years ago, nobody even knew who Palantir was. Like literally zero people. You had a couple people that knew what it was, a couple people talking about it, and now it's like the mecca of all of a sudden. Same thing with NVIDIA. You knew what NVIDIA. You made gaming cards 10 years ago. Like nobody, you had a couple people that really knew what that was, but you could ask the average person on the street, what's NVIDIA? Sounds like a computer company to me. Maybe like that was the conversation. And so things change over time. So you just have to work. I'm real. Are there any questions?
Another thing, like if you want to buy broad index funds, then VIX is a good indicator. Like if VIX is spiking, it's a good time.
That's a great point. In fact, put up. Yeah, so this was, I always talk about that. VIX is the fear index, measures about stock ownership. So hard to see. So typically you can see ran a pencil across that green line, 200-day moving average. So the 200-day moving average basically takes all the different samplings and measures it over 200 days and says this is what it would be constant. So this 200-day moving average can kind of give you a really good what baseline is or what the calm level is, the median level. And so it's right around 20, right below 20. So right now we're below the median or below the kind of the average. If you will. There's a lot of anomalies in that data. As all of those that use data, you understand that some of those top lines ones you have to wash them out because it's going to mess up. This one you can see here in April. This is when Trump announced that he was going to do tariffs, and the market absolutely lost its mind. Like they would, stocks just like flying off of a building. So it got all the way up to 60. Now the weird thing about this whole thing is that typically when the VIX is at 60, the options market chains usually reflect the same as that. April was different. For whatever reason, options pits were acting like the VIX was at 25 or in all the chains. And so what that told me is this is a fake drop. And sometimes it just takes a lot of practice, but you'll start to see weird patterns. It's the same thing you do with your job, right? You're going to know patterns. If a customer comes to you and says, hey, you've worked with that customer before, and you know whether their analysis of things is correct or not. So based upon that, you're going to make decisions on how you manage that interaction. You know that they're always like Chicken Little, the sky is falling. You're going to have one answer. If someone comes to you and says, hey, this is really bad, and you trust that they bring you good information every time, you're going to be like, oh, you have my 100% attention. So we do this constantly anyway. And so with this, it was a window into my mind of why are the options not paying 35%, 60 VIX, just like they were in Dave & Buster's when the pandemic. Why is that not happening? I can't find anything that's more than about 6 or 7% max, even really risky stuff. So that told me you need to buy a lot of shares. Buy shares, buy calls, whatever that looks like. And so I did a lot of buying during. Sure enough, it came pouring back. Now, could that have been bad? Could have. Maybe the rhetoric got heated up, or maybe would have had Europe as like not budging. It's got to be 5% and we're not doing a deal, or we couldn't get any deals, or it could have been, and markets don't like uncertainty. More uncertainty there is, more it bakes into. But people will tell you with their wallet what they're really wanting, really going. So when options pits didn't rise in value, that tells me that the market makers believed that this was all going to turn around. It was a little window into. So again, right now things are pretty calm. Now, there's one thing to note. I think there's a problem with the VIX. The VIX doesn't take into account the the options that are expiring pretty soon. They don't factor those into the equation. The problem is a lot of trading is starting to happen in the zero DTE framework. So zero DTE, if you're exact with the specifics of it, that's 1 day, 0 days to expiration. But the problem is that zero DTE trades have kind of been lumped into 2 weeks. Really, anything that's closer than 3 weeks away is it, right? And the VIX doesn't capture that. And so something like 58% of all trades fall into that zero DTE. So if that's the case, then that tells you that the VIX, if it says it's 16, it's probably closer to 20, or it could be 14. Right? You're not getting a really good sense. I suspect in the future they'll probably come up with something or something that those trades. I don't know what they're going to do. It's on its way out. It's kind of like the LIBOR. Remember the LIBOR on bonds, LIBOR +5 or LIBOR plus, same kind of thing. That'll be taken out of the picture. So much algorithm getting wild. All that to say, it's going to be more violent. I think the market's going to be more violent. So the emotional intelligence piece will become more important. You're going to have 15% drops, and then it goes up to 30%. Like, I should just left alone. But I think that's what the answer is. Buy the Apples, buy the Meta. Are we over? Right at time. Okay.
Thank you all for being part of today's Investing for the Future Lunch Bunch discussion. I hope our exploration of emotional intelligence in financial management has given you valuable insights to apply to your own investment journey. Remember, successful investing is as much about understanding your emotional responses as it is about market analysis. If you found this discussion helpful, please consider subscribing to our channel and following us for more investment insights and strategies. We meet regularly to share ideas that can help you build a stronger financial future. Until next time, stay emotionally intelligent with your investments, and remember, your financial journey is unique to you. Take care, everyone.